Hi, Carl Lanning, Brazos River Charter School with This Week in History, specifically February the 16th through 22nd. Well, I mentioned to you last week that there were two reasons why this man was an unusual successful pilot. Maybe that'd be the best way to put it, and that you were looking at them. This is Douglas Botter. Douglas Botter was born February 21st of 1910. He would later be known as Douglas Tin Legs Botter. Tin is in T-I-N. He ended up becoming a Royal Air Force pilot, and in 1931, he was involved in a crash flying one of these planes while he was doing what they call unauthorized acrobatics, very low altitude. Essentially, it meant he was showing off. He ended up crashing, and it necessitated the removal of both legs at the knee. Of course, his flying career was done at that point. However, it got resurrected because in 1939, when World War II started, the Royal Air Force was desperately short of qualified pilots, and so Mr. Botter was called back to service. He ended up being an outstanding pilot. He had 22 confirmed German kills, 4 shared victories, and 6 probables. This is him getting into the cockpit of his Spitfire. On August 1941, while he was doing a fighter sweep over France, Botter himself was shot down. In the process of bailing out, he damaged one of his prosthetic legs. The Germans didn't really have the capability of producing one that would be a suitable replacement. So, out of their respect for Botter as a pilot, they very magnanimously made arrangements for the British to airdrop one near the hospital where he was recovering. These are German troops inspecting one of his tin legs. As soon as he was reacquainted with his leg, he promptly escaped. He was on the run for about a week. After this, he was sent to a German POW camp for British soldiers, and he also promptly escaped. It turns out the guy was a serial escapist. Now, I just ask you, how would you like to be the German POW commander who had to call your commander and report that the man that just broke out of your prison had no legs below the knee? I imagine that phone call didn't go well. After multiple escape attempts, finally the Germans got tired of it, and they sent Mr. Botter to Colditz Castle Prison. This is where they sent serial escapists and very high-value prisoners of war, and no one escaped from Colditz Castle. He ended up staying there until, I believe it was April of 1945, when American forces liberated this particular camp. So, Mr. Botter. On February 20th of 1933, the United States Congress passed the 21st Amendment. It would then be sent on to the states, and after approved by 3/4 of them, this would end prohibition. It would repeal the 18th Amendment. Now, although alcohol consumption amounts in the United States did not reach pre-prohibition levels again until 1971, the country was not really quite as dry as you might think during Prohibition. Of course, we've all heard of bootleggers and bathtub gin, and speakeasies, and things like that. For example, you could also get a prescription for medicinal alcohol. Now, this was supposed to be a temporary thing, and I'm sure there are some doctors that abuse this privilege, but you did so at great risk. There was a pretty high fine for it, and you could lose your license to practice medicine. So I'm sure it happened, but I don't think it happened too much. However, there were a couple of court cases and a government loophole to sort of help the California wine industry continue during Prohibition. And the essence of the case was this. There were some fruit canners. They owned fruit orchards, and they would can fruit. As a byproduct of canning fruit was alcohol. Well, they got in trouble with the law. They sued, saying it was a simple byproduct of a perfectly legal process. The Supreme Court ruled then that it was legal to possess 200 gallons of alcohol per year as long as it did not leave the premises. California wine grape growers immediately saw an opportunity. So what they started doing, because they had been allowed to continue to grow their grapes as long as it was turned into non-alcoholic fruit juice, what they started producing were dehydrated, concentrated bricks of grapes that would be sold by mail order. The bricks actually came with the following instructions, though. Do not dissolve this brick in a gallon of water, add a half a cup of sugar, stir once a day, and place it into a cupboard for 24 days, or it will turn into wine. This proved very popular. The price per ton of grapes went from a pre-prohibition price of $9.50 per ton to, in 1924, the great big middle of prohibition, $375 a ton. This is a 3,800% increase. Now, it was reportedly not very good tasting wine, but it was 13% alcohol wine, which if you go to a store today and buy a bottle of wine, that's about what you're going to get. On a personal note, my grandfather grew grapes himself and sugarcane for exactly the same purposes, and he claimed that at one point it helped him sell a herd of sheep to a reluctant buyer. Well, that's it for this week, but just to let you know what's coming up, next week what we will deal with is, among other things, Jesus' only top 10 record. That's his gold record right there. Well, I'm Carl Lanning, Brazos River Charter School, and we look forward to seeing you right here next week.